And we're doing a co-presentation today with Fair Vote Washington. And um, my background is in organizational leadership and development, and I have a master's degree in that. And come in very helpful in my current job. And I work in ethics and quality consulting, 40 years at the Department of Veterans Affairs and 8 months until my retirement, but who's counting? Um, my favorite pandemic hobbies are creating, nurturing, and developing PEP, mountain biking, and woodworking. And I would say I'm definitely middle left leaning, and my political pain these days has been somewhat reduced from the insurrection, the time of the insurrection. That's sort of the gauge that I'm using. And I thought it might be nice, since we have enough time probably for everybody to introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your occupation, maybe your bias disclosure and political pain at this point. So why don't we start with you, Kit? You're on mute.
Thanks. I'm Kit Muehlman. I'm from Bellingham. My main occupation right now is volunteering for Fair Vote Washington and ranked choice voting. I'm also middle left leaning, and moral distress scale, only because I am working on something. I think I'm, let's see, which is the bad, which is more distress.
More distress is 10, higher.
10. I think I'm more on a 6. I think it would be worse if I weren't doing anything. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
A
Christine?
pandemic hobby. I
Oh,
took
yeah, yeah.
up sourdough bread making.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
And
Okay, great.
walking. Yeah.
Great. Christina?
Sure. So I'm Christina Holtrup, and I live in Sequim, Washington. She, her pronouns. And let's see. I'm a fellow with Fair Vote Washington. So I guess my occupation is community organizer. My favorite pandemic hobby has been knitting when I get the time, and petting my cat. My, let's see, bias disclosure. I'm pretty far to the left, and I've never heard of this political pain moral distress scale. Could you explain more?
Yeah, so on a scale of 1 to 10, there's a lot of people that have experienced a lot of distress over the last election and the insurrection and so on. And so I'm asking people to rate their sort of moral distress level, 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest.
Like in this moment?
Yeah.
Oh, like an 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gives us a sense of what's going on. Patrick, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hey, everybody. I'm Patrick McDade. I am in Portland, Oregon right now. It's Saturday morning, and I've been up for a few hours putting together a farmers market program, which is a sort of an evolved English teaching program, which is what my business, People, Places, Things does. We work with immigrants and refugees and help them navigate systems, and it has become sort of a business development, workforce development thing. That's pretty exciting, but it's been a little bit of a complicated morning already, but it's raining down here today. I am, David is married to my Aunt Donna, just for that disclosure. So I'm coming in as family here. I'm the program director of this project, and we've been doing it for about 10 years. And my favorite pandemic hobby, as like any social entrepreneur or regular entrepreneur even, I guess, is basically redesigning my entire organization over the last year. That's what I do from 6 a.m. to midnight. I I'm glad I don't have kids to take care of or animals to take care of, because it's a lot of work figuring out how to do this. Bias disclosure statement. This is so funny. I love it. I think I'm probably a 2.5, maybe a 2. I'm wherever socialism like still allows you to have some individual stuff, but most things are owned in cooperatives, but not by an entirely centralized model. That's where I am. So, political pain and moral distress scale. Well, because I work with a lot of immigrants and refugees, the Trump era was, the worst moment in history for me and my work and the people I hang out with, for many, many reasons. So I was at a 9.5 almost every day. That has reduced a lot, but I know that it's temporary. It's more like a little reprieve. But right now, my moral distress scale, because it was so high, is probably like a 5 or a 6. But I'm resting. I'm waiting, and that's why I'm excited about this project, because maybe it can keep that down a little bit if we do it right the next election.
Great, thank you. Molly, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So I'm Molly Osborne, and I'm an MD PhD, so I'm pretty academic. I work at the VA. I had ethics there, but also have been at the university as a dean for students. So as you can tell, I'm outwardly facing and working on being more inwardly facing. With respect to the Political Equilibrium Project, I've done some work talking to people. So I had the scarce resource allocation system in the VA and also across the community with Providence. And so the point is numbers are going up. And there are scarce resources that are now considered possibly rationing or at capacity. So in terms of bias disclosure, I'm middle left leaning, but in terms of moral distress scale and political pain, I'm pretty high, because as I'm very concerned about the variants, the lack of vaccinations. Even though the numbers, according to Biden, are great, they're not enough to prevent what people are saying is a fourth wave. And particularly my concern is not having enough resources to really support people I care about. My husband passed away recently, so I have a condo, which I've opened up to a friend of mine who works at La Clinica de, I won't know the word, Venta Salud in Northeast. So I'm very concerned about the underserved and the moral distress. And I might add the healthcare providers' moral distress as well, and I'll stop.
Thanks, Molly. Marjorie?
Hi, I'm retired from the University of Maryland, Baltimore, where my last 10, 12 years, I worked in global health initiatives in different countries in Africa on HIV/AIDS. And my job for the program was to set up legal entities in about 6 different African countries and Haiti. I am middle to left leaning, probably more to the left. I would say that during the 4 years of the Trump administration, my anxiety level was probably close to 10. And now my anxiety level is around a 5, 6, very different, much calmer, more hopeful. So I'm not as stressed out as I was during his tenure.
Thank you, Marjorie. Steve?
Yeah, Steve Glickman. I work at Boeing. I'm a decision analyst. I do strategy, decision analysis. Let's see, bias disclosure, I'm probably a 3. Political pain, moral distress, I'm concerned about all the voting actions that the Republican, the way they're still behaving as a party. I can embrace I can embrace some principles of conservatism, but I can't embrace fascism and authoritarianism, and so I'm like a 6 or 6.5, maybe a 7. Yeah, that's it for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Ginny?
Hi, I'm Ginny Haver, and I am currently retired, but I used to be at the VA where I knew David in quality, and before that I was the director of the chemistry lab. And my favorite pandemic hobby has developed into gardening. I think I've been doing a lot more of that than before. I think bias-wise, I'm a little bit left of center, maybe not quite as far as 3.5, but left of center. And I've thought my moral distress scale is kind of having a second peak, maybe kind of like COVID. So it was certainly higher under Trump, and then it waned when Biden got elected. But then I'm concerned now, partly with COVID, like others have said, but also just seeing the Republican Party kind of dissolve as a policy making party and getting more just focused on culture war type stuff. And I don't feel like that's good for our democracy and the future of our democracy. So it worries me that, you know, if we evolve to just a single party system that has any kind of policy issues. So I'll be interested to hear about the ranked choice voting and what we may be hopefully seeing here in Washington as more opportunities for better candidates to move forward.
Great, thank you. Claudia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Rausch. I am a management analyst for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services here in the Washington, D.C. metro area. I used to work with David and Ginny at the Seattle VA in Seattle. I was the director of credentialing and privileging there. And my favorite pandemic hobbies have been pretty much redecorating, of course, spending more time at home. My bias disclosure, I'm probably, I would say a 2. I'm pretty left leaning. My political pain and moral distress scale, I would say maybe a 9 when it comes to civil rights and diversity and inclusion issues.
Great, thank you. Jerry, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Jerry. I'm married to Ginny. I'm a retired attorney, among other things. And my bias disclosure, I guess I'm about a 4.5, and moral distress would be about a 7 or so. Not terribly unusual. My main hobby during the pandemic has been learning guitar.
Great, great. So I just wanted to remind everybody that one of the most common things that we keep reacting to is how do we get the people on the far right to understand this, or even the far left to understand this, and that is not our target audience. The PEP target audience is from the middle going towards the right and going towards the left, because it's too challenging at this point in time to try and engage with those people on the far right and the far left for that matter. So we need to keep the target audience in mind. A career in politics, ethics as with an ethics trash can in the entryway. Can ethics be introduced into politics? I say, and PEP says yes, but it is truly an underdeveloped approach and field of study. So I've been rethinking about different courses of action and making it parallel to the work that I do at the VA. And so I see PEP as a means of reducing moral distress. In bioethics, we use this concept that Molly also has at her facility called unit-based ethics conversation, where we can go in following an extremely moral distressed situation and converse on a level about the ethics involved in those cases. We can focus on the positives and the wisdom in the field of ethics. We can see peace in the eye of the storm. Personal understanding and growth is developed. Reducing moral distress around politics is a focus. Establishing a sense of community and belonging and shared goals, and sharing your understanding and growth with others is critical. PEP also as a means for making a difference in our current political environment. And in the bioethics comparison, I would say this is comparable to our ethics consultation program. And we're developing alternative ethics-based solutions, thought and conversation by understanding core beliefs, moving towards ethics-based aspirational goals, and doing something rather than something happening to you or us. And the third leg of this is PEPs as a means for problem solving in organizational development. And we'd like to use the expertise of people like Steve and Claudia in decision analysis and quality improvement, which uses a wide variety of tools. We have a strategic planning work group that includes Steve, Claudia, and a person who's now in Albania, Laura Burns, who just joined us. She used to work for the Lincoln Project in the marketing area, but found some of the concepts that they employed were unethical. So she's been glad to join us. Strategic planning as a means for organizational development, and strategic planning as a means for problem solving, and developing strategic plans that blend with ethics, which is sort of under construction. We have a work group on a candidate scorecard work group with Kara Becker and Catherine Doty that could not make it here today, and a website work group that I'm working with Evan, James, and myself. And we have a nice website. I'm really pleased with where it's at so far. So the area of focus, examining systems issues in the voting process. Today's co-presentation is with Fair Vote Washington on ranked choice voting. Through that process, we want to understand core beliefs in yourself and others that motivate and cause conflict, using applied ethics for guidance, considering approaches that better serve the electorate, and other presentations or information are available on our PEP website. We did a presentation. Oops, I lost that. We did a presentation a few weeks ago on voting for ethics based on a document in the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics. So the ethics process is as follows, and we've simplified it from the process that we use at the VA. Establishing the general question, establishing an ethics question, discuss and analyze elements related to the competing values, determine applied ethics principles or domains, and consider recommendations or action plans to support an ethics position. So here's the ethics question that I'm going to propose. Given that individual voters want their candidate selection to be fully represented based on their personal values, and there are various methods for voting in different states, what are the ethically justifiable options to best support the electorate? So the underlying values in part 1, the bolded part, is the current state. Many in the electorate think that their vote doesn't count or make a difference. Some vote for candidates that drop out of a race and their vote doesn't even count. Some voters are not aware of the candidate's values, and voting systems may be limited in representing the voters' choices. So that's the first part of the ethics question. And here's the second part. Given that individual voters want candidate selection to be fully represented based on personal values, and there are various methods for voting in different states, what are the ethically justifiable options for supporting the electorate? So the bolded part, the values in part 2, is the desired state. Mechanisms for voting that allow the electorate to best choose their candidate. Mechanisms that allow accurate comparisons on issues and or values from each candidate. For example, accurate voting guides and other respected information sources. Systems that honor choices of the electorate, and systems that support electorate values, goals, and preferences, and systems that allow for voting granularity. So I want you to just be thinking about these concepts in mind. I'm not going to be able to do a full analysis because it's very time consuming, but we could produce a document that will have a full analysis on ranked choice voting in relationship to this. But when you hear the presentation by Fair Vote Washington, I'd like you to be thinking about these elements. Greatest good for the greatest number of people, issues around transparency, issues around truthfulness, issues around conflicts of interest, issues around accurate fact-based information, issues around information that's reaching or not reaching the voters, information availability, and the act of doing no harm. Other ethical concepts that could apply include justice and fairness, the responsibility for voting, the responsibility to be an informed voter, the responsibility to enable fair and equal access to elections, and then in the category of virtue ethics, which I think really directly applies here, is developing ethical character and the practical wisdom to choose the right thing to do in complex situations. Okay. So what mechanisms best support the electorate? So ranked choice voting versus the standard binary voting process. And what mechanisms best support the electorate, which is a discussion for the future. What mechanisms are available to provide accurate and truthful information for the candidate. So these are things that we could explore as another part of the PEP activities. Additional possible topics for the future include gerrymandering versus nonpartisan boards to establish voting boundaries, electoral college representation, the process for voter validation and certification, and issues around voter suppression. And now we're going to do the presentation by Kit and Christina. Before I move on to that, we can reserve all of our questions to the end, but are there any questions at this point in time before I hand over the slideshow to Kit? Okay, if not, I will stop sharing and I will let Kit share.
I better unmute myself. So hello everybody, let's get me ready here. And here we go. Okay, so nope, here we don't go. Let's see, try one more time. There, I've got too eager. Okay, so hello, I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us. As I said, I'm from Bellingham. I'm Kit Muehlman, and I wasn't very politically active until after the election in 2016. And I was so upset about the toxic tone of politics that I couldn't sleep. And after a few days, of agony, I remembered that my brother had told me about ranked choice voting, and I understood how that systemic change could make a difference in so many things. And I've been volunteering to bring ranked choice voting to Washington State ever since, and I'm sleeping. So, and with me today is Christina Holtrop.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for us to meet with you today. I learned about ranked choice voting in high school. I was always for it. I actually attended a ranked choice voting 101 presentation like this from Fairvote, Washington in 2019. But it wasn't until the 2020 presidential election that this issue became important to me personally, because I saw this huge field of candidates and they were all fighting with each other, splitting votes, and like it was just a mess. So then I started volunteering with Fairvote Washington last November when the Column County Charter Review Commission considered a resolution in support of ranked choice voting, and I provided testimony with the help of Fairvote Washington. And shortly after that, I became a fellow with them. So yeah. All right. In so many ways, Washington State is already a leader in voting rights and access to democracy because we've got vote by mail, we have automatic and same-day registration, we have the Washington Voting Rights Act, but yet there are still ways that we can improve.
So at this point in the program, we like to ask the participants what you would like to see improved in elections. And so we invite you to type something in the chat, and don't push submit yet. This is something called a chat fall, and push submit all at once. So if there's something you'd like to see improved in elections, it can be just one thing. That's fine. I'll push it in the chat and give us a little wave if you're ready.
Thanks, Stephen.
Looks like people are already putting their ideas in the chat.
Okay. So if you haven't pushed submit yet, Christina will have a 3, 2, 1 for you all to push submit together.
All right, let me type mine out. All right, so if you haven't pushed submit, you can do on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Wow, there are tons of great ideas. We have national vote by mail, elimination of voter suppression, more choice among candidates, yes, mandatory voting, better voice and representation of who I want in office, national vote by mail, and I said an end to vote splitting, more voter participation, and equal access to voting for all great ideas.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, everybody. That's wonderful. So some of the there are a lot of things that ranked choice voting can address and some things that it doesn't address, but we will get into that as we go along. And now what would also be helpful for us is to know in this group how familiar you are with ranked choice voting. So this is a real Stone Age poll. So we're going to ask you to type the letter in the chat. So you don't have to type the whole thing, just the letter. And I'll ask Christina to check.
All right. Okay, so we have a lot of C's. We have a few A's. A lot of people are pretty new to ranked choice voting.
Okay.
But nobody except for me said that they know it well enough to explain it. So hopefully after this, you'll know
Okay.
know a little bit more.
Great. Yes. Well, so you who know it pretty well but wouldn't try to explain it, you'll get some more ideas on how we explain it. And if you have questions along the way and you want to type them in the chat, we might answer some questions in the moment, and then we'll also pause for questions at the end. And by the end of the presentation, the Fair Vote Washington executive director will be here. She's having to have another meeting right now, but she'll be here and she has lots of answers. Okay, things that we could do better on. Someone mentioned low voter turnout. Ranked choice voting increases voter turnout. Political polarization, it can help with. Third-party spoiling and third-party vote shaming, it can help with. Inequity, it can help with. The wasted votes, or when candidates drop out, it can help with. It can help with when you feel like you're voting against someone, voting against the worst evil instead of voting for who you really want. So we think ranked choice voting is a better way to do elections. Christina, tell us more about the problems that ranked choice voting can fix. Let's get into some granularity here.
Okay, so let's start with a problem that we see in a lot of our primaries, which is vote splitting. So as an example, in the 2016 state treasurer race in Washington state, more than half of the voters wanted a Democrat. However, not even one Democratic candidate made it onto the November general election ballot. Do you want to tell us why that was, Kit?
Well, as you see, the Republicans split their votes 2 ways, and the Democrats split their vote 3 ways. So the Republicans, Davidson and Waite, were the top 2 in the primary, and they went on to the general election, even though more than half the voters preferred one of the 3 Democrats.
And here is another example, and this happens both ways. This isn't a partisan issue. This can This can happen to any party, but so here's an example from the more recent 2020 lieutenant governor's race in Washington, where the Republicans got shut out because this race really demonstrates the big problem with our top two primary vote splitting. There were 11 candidates in the primary, not shown here, but the top two vote getters in the primary were Denny Heck and Marco Leas, who were both Democrats, even though most of the voters in the primary wanted one of the other 9 candidates. And over 40% of the primary voters wanted a conservative, but they split their votes among several candidates. So there was not a conservative choice in the general election. And the conservative voters mounted a write-in campaign for Joshua Freed, shown here, but he didn't actually end up being on the ballot. And none of the 3 candidates in the general election received a majority.
So another problem with the way we vote is wasted votes, as someone mentioned. So you remember this election last March, there were a lot of Democrats, and many of them dropped out right before the election. Buttigieg, Warren, Klobuchar, and Yang, and perhaps some of you voted for someone who dropped out or know someone who did. Here's our trash can again.
Yeah, well, if you did vote for a candidate who had dropped out, you had lots of company, because nearly 400,000 Washingtonians cast their ballot for a candidate who dropped out right before the election. And that is more than 25% of the votes wasted. And with ranked choice voting, these voters could have listed their backup choices so that their vote would still count if their first choice had dropped out. But in fact, 5 other states did use ranked choice voting in this election: Alaska, Hawaii, Kansas, Wyoming, and Nevada.
So here's another problem. So we've got an election between milk chocolate and candy corn, and chocolate, of course, is the winner. But suppose this is a future voters club and they're voting for candy. So what happens if a third candidate enters the race? The spoiler effect. So here we have dark chocolate entering the race and peeled off some of the chocolate votes. So even though most of the voters preferred some kind of chocolate to candy corn won the race. So here, and you can imagine, the milk chocolate voters being furious with the dark chocolate voters because they can't stand candy corn.
Yeah, so this is where vote shaming comes in. And nobody should be shamed for who they vote for, but that's the result of this voting system.
So here's another problem, as you all are, this is your focus, is the political polarization. And it's growing within our country, even though 40% of Americans don't identify with either one of the political parties. Our voting method drives the voters and candidates into one of 2 corners. So election after election, all we have is a binary choice. And the polarization of politics leads to gridlock and dysfunction, and it drives the wedge deeper and renews the cycle.
Yeah, so with our current voting method, voters feel pressure to vote for one of the 2 front runners, even if they don't necessarily like either one of them. Voters feel pressure to vote strategically instead of sincerely. And likewise, candidates feel pressure to drop out so they don't split the vote within their own party. And third parties and independents don't even stand a chance, and they are excluded entirely by our voting system.
So we're looking for a solution.
So this is where ranked choice voting comes in. It's a simple change to the way we vote that gives voters a stronger, more nuanced voice in our elections. With ranked choice voting, you can rank the candidates in the order you prefer them: first choice, second choice, and so on. For example, our voter here ranked spring first, summer second, fall third, and winter last.
Okay, so now we're going to try it out. Suppose we have an election for the dessert you're going to have at the next time you actually get together in person. And we're going to offer you a ballot that will look like this. And the voter here ranked oatmeal raisin cookies first, brownies second, Toll House third, and Devil's Food chocolate cake last. And Christina's putting a link in the chat so that you can click that link for the dessert election and get a ballot like this. And when you have the ballot, vote carefully. You have to consider these dessert choices very carefully. How are we doing? Do we have the ballot up yet?
Yes, I just posted it in the chat, so you can go click on it and fill out the poll right now.
So you fill out your ballot, and then when you're finished, click submit and come back to the main room here. Let's see. Oh, their votes are coming in. Good, great, good job, you guys. Okay, so we've got some votes in, and I'll start sharing the results. Now you'll notice we have quite a few votes in here. We have over 50 votes in here because we've used this election before in another meeting. So you can see we've got 16 votes for oatmeal chocolate chip. You see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. 13 votes for Devil's Food chocolate cake, 13 for brownie, and 11 for Toll House cookies. And at 30%, oatmeal raisin doesn't have more than half the votes yet. In a ranked choice election, we're looking for one of the candidates to have more than half the votes. And instead of picking the top two, we're going to have like an instant runoff. And we're looking for a candidate to go over this green line with more than half the votes. So what do we do to begin with, Christina? How do we get there?
Well, for a candidate to achieve a majority in a ranked choice voting election, if no candidate has a majority in the first round, then we eliminate the candidate that has the least number of first choice votes.
Right. So thank you. So Toll House cookies gets eliminated, but those voters still have a say in the final election. So imagine we're standing in 4 lines, and the first 3 lines, first choice, we stay right where we are, but the Toll House cookie voters are going to walk over to their second choice. I'm going to click this arrow on the right and see where the Toll House cookie voters go for their second choice. So they split in different areas. We still don't have a majority winner. So the next to be eliminated will be Devil's Food chocolate cake. And we'll see where those voters' next choice goes. So the Devil's Food chocolate cake first choice voters will go to their second choice. This one voter here still has a choice. They're going to go to their third choice. So here we go. And brownies won. So you can see now brownies is clearly over the half point mark, and this is interesting. So in the first round, oatmeal raisin was ahead and brownies was off in third place. But taking into account people's second and even 1/3 choice vote, brownies is preferred. If it was a head-to-head contest between oatmeal raisin and brownie would win. Are there any questions about that before we go on?
So in real life, how do you avoid that? You have to, that like this sort of scenario would be real cumbersome, right? That we have to go back and vote like 2 more times or something. So Are you going to address that?
Yes, well, thank you for Stephen for bringing that up right now. Yes, if we had to do a separate ballot for each of these elections, you'd have to come back to and vote again. So this means that the voters can vote once on their ranked choice ballot and they don't have to come back to the polls.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, I get
fact,
it. By doing the ranked choice voting first, you have all the data you need. Okay, didn't
right.
get that.
So the state of Georgia, which has the infamous bill, that they just passed the infamous voting bill that's supposed to be voting suppression, actually did a number of good things, including shortening the time between their general election, their primary election and their runoff, or their main election and their runoff. And in order to do that, they had to give their military and overseas voters ranked choice ballots because they didn't have time to print new ballots and send them out overseas and get them back. And they joined 4 other southern states in using ranked choice ballots for their military and overseas voters. So that was exciting to me. So yeah, sometimes ranked choice voting is called instant runoff because there you go.
Yeah.
Great question. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Patrick.
Can you just explain the mechanism really briefly? So when the elimination happens, they are retabulated so that everyone's highest votes, as if the other ones weren't there, are counted as their first vote. Maybe you can explain
exactly that is a very accurate way to say it. Yes, we often try to avoid words like tabulation, algorithm, even collate, because opponents to ranked choice voting, I pull in every complicated word they can find to try to make it sound complicated. But what you said was pretty simple. Yes. Yeah, you retabulate as if that eliminated candidate wasn't there. And we look at the top ranked candidate on every ballot.
And what's not happening is that you're somehow weighting people's first, second, third, and fourth choices in some string. That's not what this is.
That's right.
Okay.
That's another voting method. There's not any scoring here. Yeah. And everyone gets one vote. We're not giving a second vote to the Toll House cookie people. They just have the one vote. It just transferred. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Lisa Aro here. Sorry to be joining late. I just want to underscore, Patrick, such a good question. And it is a relatively common way that people sometimes misunderstand ranked choice voting. So just remember, with ranked choice voting, your vote counts fully for your first choice unless and until that candidate is eliminated, at which case your vote will count fully for your next choice. So this is why it never hurts your first choice candidate to rank second, third, and fourth, and so on. It will never hurt so this incentivizes voters to actually use their rankings because it doesn't hurt their first choice to rank their others. Other voting methods do penalize the first choice if you rank others. And that's important to understand that this is not ranked choice. So yeah, thanks, Kit. That was perfect.
Great, thank you. Okay. All right. So, Christina.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, in that election, we saw how the voters who chose the last place for first, or I forget what
Toll House.
what came in. Yeah, the Toll House cookies for first place, they still had a say in the final count. And voters could vote without being concerned about whether their candidate was a front runner. So Kit, how does that make elections better?
Well, one way is it gives you more voices and more choice. I think in the chat box, someone said we wanted a better voice, a stronger voice in our elections. So with ranked choice voting, voters have more real choices because they can vote, like Lisa said, sincerely for their favorite candidate. knowing they have a backup choice without hurting their first choice. And in places that use ranked choice voting, we see more women, minorities, third parties, and independents running an election without fear of being spoilers. So Minneapolis has used ranked choice voting since 2009, and exit polls show that voters overwhelmingly like it. Another benefit of ranked choice voting is that it promotes civil and issues-focused campaigns. So the candidates in these photos are opponents in the same race, yet they combine some campaign events and focused on the positions they have in common. So Christina, why aren't they running negative campaigns?
Well, imagine that you are running for election, you're out knocking on doors, talking to voters, and you come to a house with your opponent's yard sign. Normally, you would just skip it because they've already made their choice. But if this was a ranked choice election, that changes things because you realize that you can still ask for that voter's second choice support. And if you want their second choice vote, it's not a good idea to sling mud at their first choice candidate. So the best strategy is to be civil and talk about what you stand for. And that is how you win in a ranked choice election.
So ranked choice voting can also save money. So cities that can combine the primary with a general election, and that boosts turnout and saves taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, for example, New York City is using ranked choice voting this year, and taxpayers will save about $15 million every time ranked choice voting lets them skip a separate runoff election.
So candidates save money too by only having to run one campaign, and this helps lower the barrier to entry and encourages more new candidates to run. And we have a little summary video for you. And hang on, I'm sorry, I need to stop sharing and then try again with the sound optimized. And stop share. Sorry about this. I've just started using Zoom. That's not true, but yeah. All right. I know this works. There. Okay.
Politics is tearing us apart, and it's because elections aren't working for most of us. Here's why. In the US, each of us can vote for the candidate we like the most, but whenever more than 2 candidates are running to win 1 seat, it's possible for most voters to hate whoever wins. Because of this split vote, politicians can ignore the will of most voters and still win. Ranked choice voting gives you the freedom to select a backup choice to prevent that from happening. Let's say a group uses ranked choice voting to decide what to eat for dinner tonight. Each voter selects their favorite dish, but also has the option to choose backup dishes. If one food receives more than half the votes, it wins, just like in any other election. But let's get to dessert, where the competition is more fierce. What if no ice cream flavor has more than 50% of the vote? Under a normal race, vanilla would win, even though a majority of voters didn't pick it. With ranked choice voting, the flavor with the fewest votes is eliminated, and voters who chose that flavor as number 1 will have their votes count for their next choice. Everyone gets a say, no one wastes their vote, and the winner is the flavor that the largest number of people agreed upon. That's ranked choice voting. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. You get more voice and more choice, and that makes elections better for all of us.
All right. So I hope this map works for you. It's not quite as updated as it could be. Christina?
Yeah, so as you can see, ranked choice voting is already widely used in our country. 26 states use ranked choice voting in some form, and it's also time to add Georgia and 10 more cities in Utah and Vermont to this map. But Maine and Alaska already use ranked choice voting statewide for federal elections, in addition to all these other municipalities across the country. So does it work as well in practice as it does in theory, Kit?
Well, exit polls are very positive. So voters who used ranked choice voting overwhelmingly like it and want to keep it by margins of 60 to 85%. And that's a pretty high level of agreement in this day and age.
Yeah, that's for sure. So what are we doing in Washington State right now about this issue? A lot's been happening. We at Fair Vote Washington are working hard to bring ranked choice voting to Washington. Only a few places so far are allowed by law to use ranked choice voting. One of them is King County, and our supporters are busy persuading King County to change their charter to start using ranked choice voting. The Washington for Equitable Representation group supports our efforts. When we're ready to put an initiative on the state ballot, they are prepared to mobilize their supporters. We are also watching a court case in Yakima County that that wants to use ranked choice voting as a remedy to solve an equity issue, because there is a large Latinx population in Yakima, and yet they are underrepresented on their city council. So they are using the Washington Voting Rights Act to get ranked choice voting in order to remedy that. Also, 5 states have taken the initiative to pass resolutions supporting a bill that would allow local areas to use ranked choice voting if they want to. So to lift the ban on ranked choice voting, so more places get the option to do it if they want to. And we expect to see more of these resolutions supporting ranked choice voting, but the local options for ranked choice voting bill it will become active in the January 2022 legislative session, and we are working to get that passed.
Thanks. So up to this point, we've been talking about ranked choice voting in an election that elects a single winner, like a mayor or a governor. But what happens when you have 2 or more seats to fill, like a city council or a school board? So this picture shows how a city council with 10 members could reflect the voters. Now, a ranked choice ballot can really help with this, and it gives what's called proportional representation. So our current method of voting gives an outsized majority of seats to the gray suits and leaves minorities with very little representation. So this is a bigger subject than we can touch on today. And Christina, if you'll put the politics in the animal kingdom in the chat. So we're not going to talk too much more about proportional representation, but I want to let you know that it exists because the benefits of proportional representation are transformative. A few American cities use it. Cambridge, Massachusetts has been choosing their city council members in this method since 1941. And when you use proportional representation, it gets you this equitable result where your city council reflects more accurately the views of the community. And another benefit of this is that it's an end run around gerrymandering. So if you want to know more about that, Christina's put a link in the chat to Politics in the Animal Kingdom. It shows you how it works. There's a lot of transferring. It's called single transferable vote in this video. Okay, so thank you so much. That's our presentation. And now, are there any questions in the chat so far, Christina?
No questions so far, but I did put a link to the Politics of the Animal Kingdom video if people want to learn more about proportional representation.
Okay, so I wanted to, somebody said voting granularity, and I wanted to address the granularity there. When you have a ranked choice ballot and the results can be very transparent. You can publish every round and you can see who, how the vote started, what the first choices really were, sincerely were. And that helps understand what's going on in the electorate, even if the result turns out to be the same. So Donna asked a great question. What are the main objections to ranked choice voting? Well, I'll start and then I'm sure Lisa will have some more going on here. The first thing that we hear is that it's too complicated for voters, that they won't be able to rank choices, and then that might discourage them from voting. But the thing is, if you just want to make one choice, like always, you have the freedom to do that. And it encourages, someone said, the responsibility to be an informed voter. It encourages people to learn more about the candidates so that they can be more informed and make their second and third choices. So that is the main objection. We also hear objections from candidates or electeds who think they might be displaced if they can't win with their minority bloc.
Yeah, it's always hard passing legislation about election reform with the people who have already been elected under the current system and are naturally reticent to see a change.
Yes. And another objection that we frequently hear is what happened in Pierce County. So Pierce County had ranked choice voting around 2008. They used it for, I think, 2 elections, and then they decided to go to the top 2 primary. So they spent an enormous amount of money on that election, and they elected a county auditor who was, most people felt incompetent. So the election software, equipment, knowledge has really improved a lot since then. So places that are starting to use ranked choice voting now are finding that it costs very little, and if they can combine the primary, when they combine the primary and the general, it actually saves them money. So the cost is way down. Our current election machines can for the most counties, can handle the new software that would be required, and that unpopular assessor actually came in first in every round of voting in that election. So there's no voting that prevents voters from electing a bad candidate. Those are my 3 main ones.
Yeah, Lisa, did you have anything to add? I know that.
Hi everybody. Again, I'm Lisa Aero. I'm the director of Fair Vote Washington, and I apologize for being a little bit late. Kit just did a great job. The 3 most common things we hear are probably, oh, what if it confuses the voters? And oh, what about logistics and costs? And then kind of, what do we say is the 3rd one, Kit? Election of incumbents who don't want to change the system that elected them. Basically, those are probably the most common.
Yeah, so Virginia asked, are Republicans opposed to ranked choice voting? If so, how to convince them? Well, actually, the local options bill, which is in the legislature, has a Republican co-sponsor who testified that ranked choice voting could really shake things up in a good way. And he thought that, yes, ranked choice voting can help minorities get better representation, and you might find some surprising minorities like Republicans in deep blue districts. So in my opinion, that's how to convince them. And then in the Appropriations Committee, 3 Republicans voted in favor of moving the bill ahead in our legislature. So Republicans are not completely opposed. And in Utah, the Republicans are, for the most part, behind ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is really spreading in Utah, and it helps them. It really helps them in their primaries get the best candidate, the candidate with the broadest support, instead of having a minority bloc, hijack a split vote. So there we go.
We're seeing across the country, we are seeing Republicans be quite interested in ranked choice voting. They're understandably more cautious to adopt. That's what it's part of what it means to be a conservative in your views. You're not ready to maybe jump on, be in the forefront of change. But as they're seeing it work, and Utah's been a great example for Republicans around the country. And so, for example, right now, the Virginia GOP is using ranked choice voting for, I think it's a June primary to pick their next their governor candidate. They've been having a devil of a time there with a very contentious field of, I think, about half a dozen candidates, and one of them is a woman. You may have been noticing her name. Chase is her last name, and she dubs herself Trump in heels. And not surprisingly, she's got a very passionate base of followers. And the Republican Party in Virginia is really struggling with how do they pick among this very divisive field one candidate to unify behind to advance to the general election for governor. And so they've decided to use ranked choice voting. It's interesting.
Is there a way to provide assurance to those skeptics on the security of the election process? I'm handing this one right to Lisa.
So ranked choice voting doesn't bring in any additional concerns about security. So, if somebody's already feeling that there's fraud and, black box and stuff like that, they're not going to, perhaps be reassured by ranked choice voting, but there's nothing new there. So, all of the things that we know, paper ballots, making sure that, you're never, any of the voting equipment is ever connected to the internet, making sure that elections are always audited, that there are observers, all of this happens under ranked choice too.
So Virginia asked, how do we support ranked choice voting in Washington? Thank you for that question. Well, one of the main things you can do is sign up as a supporter with Fair Vote Washington, and then we'll keep you looped in with developments in Olympia and across the state. And another thing you can do is learn to talk about ranked choice voting, inform yourself, and talk to your friends and family. Because one of the main barriers to adopting ranked choice voting is people don't know about it. And usually when people learn about it, they like it. And if we are looking for more groups to talk to, if you're connected to another group that does Zoom meetings, we would love to do a presentation like this. If you can just put us in touch with them, we'll take it from there. Christina put fairvotewa.org in the chat. There are chapter meetings across the state. You can drop in and just see what's going on. And sometimes we have statewide Zoom parties.
We do have a lot of volunteer teams, and if you're really interested in rolling up your sleeve and volunteering, there's many opportunities, and those you can find on our website. Donating is always also some way that you can support, because it all does take money to help make sure that we have a good team there in the legislature and so on. But by signing up at our website, it allows us to count you. And to be able to tell legislators, there are, so many people, 100 whatever thousand in your district, makes a big difference. They pay a lot better attention. And it also lets us just keep you up to date. So that's a really great first step. And then, as Kit said, just all the different ways that you can spread the word. Let your friends and neighbors know that you just learned about ranked choice voting. Ask them if they've heard about it yet. And it's what we need to do in our state. You can see us from that map that Kit showed you that ranked choice voting is already being used in more than half the states. So more and more people are hearing about it, but it's been somewhat quiet here in Washington. we're trying to change that.
So, Lisa and Kit and Christina, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm thinking that it might be helpful for us to devote a web page on our PEP website to specifically to ranked choice voting. As you know, just based on our audience here, there are people from outside of Washington State, but you have a very nicely refined product. Is there a refined product similar to this on a national level that we can also link to?
Yes, there's a Fair Vote National.
Okay.
So we're Fair Vote Washington. Fair Vote National, we are a separate, we're independent, administration wise, funding, our funding is independent, but we are in a network with them, obviously. So fairvote.org. And there's also a Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center you might be interested in. They are not an advocacy organization, but they help jurisdictions, or they help election officials administer ranked choice voting with free software and free help. Great.
I'm going to continue my work with my colleague Robin Cook, who is an ethicist who I've been working with for 18 years. And I'd like to do a web page that we will synopsize the ethical components to this and why the ethical components support this direction, and then link to both Fair Vote Washington as well as the national website for additional information. So rather than replicating what you already have, to provide a different view, a lens, so to speak, from the ethics side, and then sort of have an alliance with Fair Vote Washington as well as with the national side. Because I really, one of the parts that I struggled with was we were having a difficult time finding the downside. And the true downside is the issues around transparency, in that there's already mistrust in the system, and being able to develop that trust is just an ongoing educational process.
Yes.
David, if I could respond just briefly to that one point, you're absolutely right that one of the common things we do hear, especially from election administrators and elected officials, is, hey, this is the wrong time to change the voting system. We have so many people who don't trust elections and such low confidence. And what we tend to say is like, so that means you want to just keep on doing it the same way? If it's not working, look at the places that are using ranked choice voting. What you're seeing is increased engagement, increased trust and confidence. So this is, if anything, it's a reason to embrace a better way to do elections.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that ethics also does, is it has a way of flipping people's thinking around a certain issue based on an anchored ethical construct. So I think we may be able to assist you in that endeavor.
Thank you so much, David. I would also like to mention one more thing, which is, as you pointed out, I think that we were at a meeting last month, ranked choice voting is not the only alternative voting method that exists in the world. There are dozens of different ways of voting. Ranked choice voting is the one that has the most traction, is certainly the most achievable, most implementable at this point in the United States. But you will find some passionate, I should have said, who opposes ranked choice voting? Advocates of other voting methods are another strong and vocal group, in some cases so passionate that they will tell you that ranked choice voting is worse than the current method. That we believe very passionately is completely not true. We're never making a promise that ranked choice voting is perfect, but it is certainly a vast improvement over the current method. And most voting advocates will acknowledge that. But I would be happy to help be a resource for you as you do your ethical analysis. It would be interesting to look, even if, for example, approval voting or score voting or star voting, some of the other methods that are still not widely used and have very, very little track record, but have proponents who advocate for them. There are philosophical and, you know, I think ethical considerations for the how each voting method, how the rules of the game incentivize candidates and voters to behave. And there are some things I'd be happy to address with you that, you know, where I might be a fan of some of the other voting methods. What I often say is that voting methods are like tools in your toolbox. You might have a favorite tool, but you're probably not going to use it for every single job, right? Certain tools will be well attuned.
So how did you choose this specific method for Washington State?
Well, first of all, just to say it's not very hard. If you and I first got introduced to voting methods in the classroom. I was a math teacher for years, and more than 30 years ago, I taught a lesson to my 7th grade math students on the mathematics of voting and apportionment. And we looked at quite a few different voting methods. And I actually ended up with a personal favorite method that is not ranked choice voting. But when I learned that the motivations around public elections are unique and important to consider, so that a voting method that might work really well in a group of friends, when everybody basically cares about the other person. So like you're sitting with a group of friends and you're thinking, oh, let's go to a movie. We all got vaccinated. We're going to go out and do something. We're going to go to a restaurant, go to a movie, something like that. You're trying to make a choice. And then people will naturally kind of lean in and like, well, there's these 5 different movies. I could live with any of these 4, but that one I don't want. And somebody else might say, well, you know, something similar, right? Every person essentially sort of gets a thumbs up, thumbs down on every choice, and you find a consensus. And that's a beautiful way of voting. It's just, there's so many values that I think are upheld and that are important in that kind of an approach. And yet, when you find out that as soon as somebody is willing to say, oh, well, I could live with not just this movie, but that one also, or that one, then you have implicitly undermine support for your first choice. And then you realize like, oh, okay, how are people going to actually behave in actual elections? Well, what we find is that voting method, people just vote for one, and they don't say what their next choice or their next choice or their next choice is. Because if you recall, I think it was Patrick had that great question about how ranked choice voting worked. And he realized that by ranking a second and a third and a fourth, if you wish, ranking additional candidates, you never hurt your first choice. That is an important feature of ranked choice voting that is not present in those other methods. So it can be subtle. You can have advocates of other methods say, hey, ours is better and ranked choice is terrible because blah, 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 blah. The thing to do is ask them, has their method been tested in public elections? Does it have 100 years of evidence and research showing how voters actually use it? And that's what ranked choice voting at this point has. And those are the reasons why we are advocating for ranked choice. But we're also pretty excited about rollouts of other voting methods that are happening in a few cities in our country. And we're watching really carefully. We think it's quite possible that someday there will be a better voting method invented. Ranked choice voting is just much, 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 much better than the current method. And we should definitely adopt it now and then keep looking for an even better one.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. We ran over, which is totally fine. And I know that we had one person that had to leave early. So I wanted to draw this to conclusion and thank everybody. And we will continue. I may have more questions for you, Lisa and Kit. So I'll just be in communication with you by email. Or maybe we need to set up a Zoom meeting with you and Rob and myself as we get more depth into the ethics analysis.
Glad to do that. Glad to be a resource. And Christina and Kit, thank you for a great presentation. I'm sorry I missed the first part, but you guys did a great job.
Yeah, nice job, Christina and Kit.
Thanks so much for inviting us. I really enjoyed meeting your group, and it was such great questions. I look forward to working some more with you.
All right. We'll do that in the future. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. That was really great. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Ginny. Bye, Patrick. Good to see you.